Okay, hello everyone and welcome to Workstream 4. My name's Emily Scott and I'm the Monitoring and Evaluation Manager with Study Hire, and I have the pleasure of being the chair for this workstream today, where we're going to be hearing about different perspectives around student engagement and empowerment. So a really timely, really important discussion that we're going to have, and I'm very much looking forward to it, and I'm sure everyone who's joining us is equally as excited to hear what our speakers have to say. So we're going to have 3 speakers and they're going to have about 15 minutes each to speak. Then we'll save questions for the end. You're all welcome to send your questions via the Q&A function on your screens, and we've got a very helpful chat monitor called Amber, my colleague, who is going to send them through for me. If you could just pop a note to say who the question's for, or if it's for all of the speakers, then we'll come to those at the end. That will be really helpful. So without further ado, I think we'll introduce our first speaker. So I'm very happy to introduce Claire Parker, who is joining us from Go Higher West Yorkshire and Leeds City College. Claire is a work skills and progression leads at Leeds City College and has 10 years experience in education, as well as 7 years experience in career and employability based roles. Claire is also a qualified careers advisor and has 3 years experience of engaging students, curriculum and influencers in the UniConnect programme. And today, Claire is going to be talking to us on the subject of keeping students engaged in a virtual setting, UniConnect in an FE setting. So Claire, thank you very much. After you.
Fantastic. So I hope I'm coming through okay and you can see my slides okay. And welcome, hello, good morning. And as mentioned, I work for the project Go Higher West Yorkshire. And in particular, I focus on supporting our students at Leeds City College, which is an FE provider. So I'm really interested, so I believe you can use the Q&A section of this event. So just while I move on to kind of discuss what I'm going to be talking about today, if you could in that box just explain who you are, who I am talking to, and what kind of student interactions or outreach you're having with young people, and it might just help how I phrase some of the rest of what I'm going to be talking about. So what am I going to be talking about today? I am going to be looking at making outreach accessible. So at Leeds City College we run various projects, initiatives and events, and these are aimed at supporting young people to consider higher education as an option for them. And as part of that, we're targeting the students who traditionally don't progress into higher education for whatever reason. So today I'm just going to be talking through how we've reacted in a COVID situation and made these activities, interactions accessible by being online, and how we plan to move that forward, and how we look at what type of engagement we're having from that. And overall, I'm just going to summarise and conclude that moving forward, the kind of approaches that we're looking at taking. Lovely, I can see some comments finally coming through. FE secondary school, great. So hopefully, in a secondary school, some of these ideas I'm gonna talk through now might be of use to you. And likewise, if you're working at a university, it might be interesting to see what in a college, how we're trying to approach things. So I'm just going to start with a little bit of an overview and how we have adapted some of our outreach activities over the COVID period, but again, how we're moving them forward for this academic year. So as you can see on the screen, or I hope you can see on the screen, I've just listed some examples of the outreach that we are currently trying to provide to our young people. So the first being the study buddy programme. So we know at college that level 2 progression from level 2 into level 3 is a big barrier for our UniConnect students. So we run a study buddy programme, which is a GCSE revision programme where staff are trained to support and give pastoral support to students as they're revising for their GCSEs. So in reaction to this, we went for an information provision for this. So as you can see in the information strand, we went to a static classroom and we promoted this through social media, and we used Google Hangouts because we're a Google college. So moving forward, plan A for this academic year is for it to be a distance learning opportunity. And plan B would for it be to be an asynchronous opportunity. So distance learning, meaning that we can still interact with the students, we still have that face-to-face contact, but it is online. Whereas asynchronous would be that the students would be given support, given things to look at, but in their own time. And this is the same for our on-off stage. So this was a widening participation event that we worked with lots of different performing arts, schools and conservatoires and universities, and we brought them onto campus because we realised that accessing them physically can be a big barrier, even when we're living in a face-to-face kind of world where it's easy to move around and visit universities. So this is a really big learning for us to think about how we can take a live event that happened at college where lots of different universities came in and delivered tasters. How can we do that this year, especially with that October kind of deadline of some conservatoires? How can we bring that into the college, or bring that to our students, but in a different way? So again, our preferred option is to do this in a so we've chosen to do this in an asynchronous way, so that we are going to collate all the taster sessions from the universities, from the conservatoires, and put these onto a classroom so that students can look through them, work through them in their own time. Whereas we've got a project coming up called Talking Heads, which is part of Black History Month, where we're getting local African and Caribbean professionals to come and talk about their journey to our ACS Society. And we're running this as a distance learning opportunity. Therefore, it will be similar to this, and everybody will be in a virtual classroom, and they will still be able to access the aspiration raising event that we hope. Another big part of our role is information sessions. So this has been a big adaptation. So initially, over the summer, we've created static classrooms with resources, information and tools and advice for students to access, but in their own time, and it's not monitored and we're not giving any feedback. Our aim for this is to make it asynchronous, and I've created this presentation as a resource, and I'll share it in the Q&A link once we've finished, because I have included some links for some kind of tools that we use to make these really interactive. But I'm going to go zoom into that a little bit and have a look and explain how we do use our classroom content. So we are a Google college, but if you're a Microsoft college or establishment, you will have similar ways of doing this. So we are going to run all our information sessions through our Google Classrooms, and we've recorded presentations to be accessible in an asynchronous way. Therefore, we've recorded YouTube clips, we've recorded voice notes, we've used interactive quizzes, hyperdocs, external poll sites if we're doing it in a distance learning way, so that students can still interact with the material. Because in Google, all of the outcomes come to you, and you can mark and give feedback and send it back to the student. So a really big thing for us when creating these Google Classrooms was making sure that students felt confident that they could navigate their way through them and make sure they're accessing the information, activities that we want them to, and that it's specific to their course and for their needs. So yeah, we use, as you can see in the kind of middle bottom of the screen, we use roadmaps that have hyperlinks in that help navigate the student's way through that. So thinking about engagement, over the summer for the information site, we had over 300 students engage over the summer, signing up to the classroom, which was really fantastic. And the promotion, and that was successful due to the promotion through tutors. This then formed one-to-ones, and which was a really positive output from the classroom content. And we were then able to focus and work with the careers department to make sure that the UniConnect students got the support that they needed. As I mentioned, the promotion of this is heavily reliant on tutors, which can be a barrier. So that's why moving forward, we're moving into a more blended way of working and using other platforms to help promote and encourage students to engage with our initiatives, which brings me on to using social media. So again, in the Q&A box, I'm really interested to know if anyone's already using social media, and for my information, because it's something that we're evolving at the moment, what kind of social media platforms you're using. So again, if you could just pop any comments there in the box, that would be really appreciated. So I'm just going to talk to you how we have, over the summer months, set up our social media to be a helpful tool to help students engage with our classrooms and all the different activities and events that we use. So the biggest kind of thing that we've developed is our Spotify. No, it's not a Spotify, it's a podcast, again, which I've included the links on these slides in case you want to have a listen and share with any students, because it is not focused towards Leeds City College, it is focused for more of a regional and for any students wanting to progress into higher education. So this has been a really big learning curve for us, but it's been a great way of exploring a different medium, which is accessible by students, but also accessible by parents and carers, which, as we know, are key informers to our young people that we're working with. Alongside that, we've been using Instagram, which again can be a useful tool for communicating with the students, with parents and carers, but we found it a massive communication tool with our curriculum areas. Leeds City College is a really big FE college, and a lot of our departments have Instagram accounts. So this has really helped us communicate key messages with them. We've also created YouTube clips. So all of the information that we normally would give, maybe in passing conversations with students, or visiting classrooms, supporting tutors, we've created some of our own YouTube guides. So again, we have them that can be used in presentations. We can post them on our social media. And also when we're speaking with students, we're doing this now through Hangouts, which has been a really useful tool, especially during a lockdown of all of our internet and programs at the moment at Leeds City College, but that's something different. But our Google Hangouts has been strong, and we can communicate to students through that. And again, these all work together to kind of support students in a different way. Engagement wise, I can't really tell you or give you an update how successful engagement's been on these, because as I've mentioned, the college has unfortunately had no systems for about a month now. But looking and moving forward from that, we do hope that we'll be focusing this towards our parents and carers, which is a resource that students, that tutors can share with them, and it's going to help promote our activities and our other events, as well as us being able to promote them through these channels. So I'm just going to finally conclude. I hope I'm not over time. Just what does all of this look like moving forward? Because obviously at the moment we're still, or the college is operating in a mixed approach to learning, and we fit in with how those departments and curriculum areas are learning. So we are moving forward going to be a blended outreach service. And by that, I mean we are going to be dipping in to those distance learning opportunities, those face-to-face opportunities, and the asynchronous opportunities. For each one that we're planning, we have that as an A, B, C plan. And, you know, some things need to be face to face. The need to go to a university visit, get that feel and get that vibe for studying there is never going to be able to be replicated online. But that's where the layers approach comes in, and can that be enhanced? Can that event and activity now be enhanced by our Spotify account, for example, where we go into depth about applying and studying at a conservatoire, for example. And it needs to be timely with everything that happens. So yes, we can use online as a great resource and a great way of adding and enriching the student's experience, but static information in our you know, from the college's point of view, will be lost, and it still needs to be guided. Which then leads me to my final thing, is this moving approach within the culture, so that we are moving towards a self-responsible culture within college, so that students can access these layers and these blended ways of learning and having these opportunities, so that they are more responsible for their role in taking part in these activities and events that are pushed and encouraged their way. So I know all questions are going to be at the end. If you do have some, I think please add them to the Q&A chat, but responses will be at the end. So we're not being rude, we just really want you to make sure that you can listen to the next guest who's joining us. But it's a thank you from me, and like I say, I'm happy to talk through any of the points, and I'll share the link for you in case you are interested in any of the different resources that we use to bring our events into an online world. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. That's absolutely fascinating. And I can tell by the questions that are coming in that there's a lot of interest around podcasts and about engaging with social media as well. So we'll get to those at the end. And yeah, absolutely fascinating to listen to. And you kept time as well. So thank you so much. So we'll move straight on to our next speaker. And I'm pleased to be able to introduce Hester Gartrell, who joins us today in her capacity as Senior Access Officer at Birkbeck, University of London. So Hester runs Birkbeck's outreach programme in Newham, bringing learning opportunities, career support, and both undergraduate and postgraduate advice and guidance to residents and community venues across the borough. She has an MSc in Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies from the University of Edinburgh, and has previously worked in charities supporting children and young people in North and East London, Greater Manchester and Glasgow, so huge reach there. And Hester is going to be speaking to us today on the subject of building digital confidence, delivering online outreach across the generations. So Hester, over to you.
Hi everyone, thank you for the introduction, and yes, I'm Hester from Birkbeck's Access and Engagement Department, and today I'm going to talk to you about providing online outreach for mature and part-time students. So a little bit of an introduction to Birkbeck in case you haven't heard of us before. We are London's evening university. We're part of the University of London, but quite differently from our other colleagues within that group, the majority of our teaching is done from 6 p.m. till 9 p.m. in the evening. We have a really high number of mature and part-time students, and we also have quite a flexible entry policy, which means that we have a lot of people who come to us with non-traditional qualifications or who have had a significant break from education. My department in particular works with the following groups: refugees and asylum seekers, trade union members. We have a geographical focus on Newham and Camden residents. We also do some work with further education colleges and BTEC students. And as you can see, a lot of our focus, we really predominantly focus on over 16s. And apart from our work with BTEC students and with some FE college students, we predominantly actually work with over 21, so more mature learners. But I hope that what we're going to talk about is really relevant to any pieces of work from the kind of 16 plus age range. So what I'll be talking about today is 3 main case studies about our immediate response to the move online, and then also a bit of a talk about what we're thinking about next. So in terms of our immediate response, our 3 case studies we'll be looking at are around digital exclusion and digital confidence and our learnings there, about building community in a virtual world, which I know we've kind of touched on in the last presentation. And then finally, effective evaluation and quality control when you're moving your widening participation work online. So what was our immediate response to lockdown? Like most of you, what we did was move everything online. We previously hadn't done anything online, actually. It was always something that was there in the back of our minds that we should be using things like YouTube or video content well, basically using it at all in order to reach people. But it was just something that, because of our level of delivery face to face, we never really had time to develop. So we straight away moved to live sessions delivered through Blackboard Collaborate. We began recording videos to share on YouTube and Panopto. We moved all of our scholarship programs, because we run a number of bursary and scholarship programs, to online applications with over the phone advice. And with our partners, we paused a lot of our partnerships, partly, as I'm sure many of you know, a lot of colleges and a lot of schools were also kind of in this shift and didn't really have the time or the capacity to connect with their university partners. And we also began working with our partners in new ways. So I work very closely with our Newham local authority, and with them we actually joined quite a lot of COVID response groups and sat more as a consulting partner there around kind of our expertise in relation to education and working with a variety of communities. So that's kind of our immediate response. And what did our digital delivery actually look like in the first kind of 4 to 6 months? Well, we produced 47 videos, 663 minutes of content, had over 3,000 views and around 600 people who watched those videos from beginning to end. And in terms of our digital delivery, live events, we did around 27 hours of live events and had 358 interactions. We typically do quite small scale events, and the move to online enabled us to have a much greater reach. But as I'll talk about later, and I'm sure many people have found, it can be quite difficult with some of the online activity to actually track whether it's your target group who are accessing the material and the resources that you're creating. So while we had a wider reach, it was quite difficult for us to tell, especially with things like the video content, whether that was actually being reached by the people that we wanted it to reach. So our first case study that I'm going to talk about today is around digital exclusion and digital confidence. So what did we learn about this? I think a really big piece for us was around quality of internet and people being actually able to access our content, especially for our asylum seeker groups that we work with. We found that was a real issue, and I think it's something that we've been thinking about in terms of moving forward, whether we should be offering data vouchers, and also that difference between asynchronous and synchronous content, where we can actually provide content for people to watch whenever they can get to a good internet quality, somewhere like a cafe, perhaps not at home, or when they do have data. Another thing we learned about was, I think I was quite surprised at the level of digital confidence and competence among some of the groups that we worked with. We really did have to kind of go back to basics on a lot of things. For example, with Panopto, which is the video recording software that we use for our academic teaching, we actually found that some people were even struggling to find where the play button was for that, or in some of our live events, if we asked people to refer back to something that we emailed out to them, kind of moving between the two screens was something that was quite a challenge. So for us at the moment, a real learning has been around how can we create resources that help people to engage in digital learning and build their confidence and their ability to navigate our kind of resources and things like that. We also really learned that we were going to have to move to using familiar platforms. Initially, we used what we've got, and that was what the university was already using. So Blackboard Collaborate and Panopto, which is what we use for teaching. But I think there was a real recognition from us that when we deliver our outreach work, that is usually in the first instance in a familiar community setting. So it might be in a workplace for our trade union members, or it might be in a community setting like a library or a community centre. So the question at the beginning was really, well, we need to apply that to digital outreach as well. And one of our main learnings has been about using platforms that are kind of people's own space, not our space. And that might be things like Facebook, that might be YouTube, you know, all the standard things that most people would have as an app on their phone or computer. And then finally, our big learning was around the importance of targeted content. And I'm sure many people are aware of this. You know, it's not just enough to stick up your videos on YouTube and hope that the right people come across them. Where we had real success was where we were still working with our partnership groups and our kind of mailing lists and our community contacts, and very much getting specific content out to specific people and pairing that digital recorded content with live events, which kind of offered a focus point. Where we really learned a lot of this was in our Big Ideas programme, which is our flagship public lecture programme, essentially an opportunity for lecturers to share their research, but in a way which is open for anybody to come along, and particularly for people who don't have previous experience of higher education. We would typically deliver this in community venues, and when we moved to online, we began to create resources to enable people to access it on online if they weren't familiar with online settings. So we offered some digital mentoring, so people could do some testing of the software before they came and joined us. We created a guide to learning with others online, both a written format and now a video format that people can engage with if they want to watch that before they come along to anything like this. And we created a mixture of synchronous and asynchronous. So like I said, people can come along to a live session, but they can also access all the content that they want in a recorded format if they want to watch before or after. We've actually decided to swap this public lecture series from Collaborate to YouTube Live because we feel that's a lot more of an accessible platform. So from our next one, which will be in Black History Month onwards, we'll be using the YouTube Live platform and linking it up with Zoom in order to kind of get it out to people in a way that is accessible for them. The next case study I wanted to talk about was building online community. We all know that social connectedness and feeling of belonging is really important to people taking the step into higher education. It's also something that we try to run through all of our events. A lot of people that we work with, it may be some years between kind of first encountering us and deciding they want to take the step into higher education, or they may decide that that's not for them, but actually the kind of educational outreach that we offer, such as our public lectures, is still of real value to them. And we want to make sure that there's an online community and a welcoming atmosphere throughout all of our events. So we really learned the importance of creating a conversational environment and leaving space for people to connect and to meet with each other and to network. We also have really moved towards trying to encourage people to swap details with each other and set up those personal connections, and have tried to use more innovative forms of social media. In our community leadership programme, which is a 5-week free evening taster workshops, a series of taster workshops based on our certificate of higher education for community leadership, we really tested out this kind of creating a community and creating a conversation. When we did it face to face, obviously there were lots of opportunities for people to connect with each other, to kind of, you know, find out that they live next door to each other, because we do this for Newham residents specifically. So a very kind of close-knit borough and lots of people from the same geographical area. But, you know, we were thinking, how do we actually do this in an online setting? And some things that we found really important were really leaving space and time for chat. We do send out resources, so handouts and video content, but when we bring people into the live sessions each week, we leave a really significant amount of time in breakout rooms, and we don't sit in those breakout rooms. We might pop in and out, but what we find is as soon as we pop in, people kind of clam up and their conversations quite often can become a bit stilted, or we kind of break the flow. So we try and leave a good kind of 15 to 20 minutes in our breakout rooms to kind of let people chat about what they want to talk about. We do give them activities. So in our first session, we very much focus on what do you have in common. And we kind of leave people to share their stories and share their experiences and find their similarities, which has been really important. In terms of encouraging people to swap details, we encourage people to do that in the private chat. And we also use Google Drive, where people can put in a short blurb about themselves and their contact details so that people can get in touch with each other if they want to. Using social media has been really important for this, and we're kind of starting to embark on our journey of using the WhatsApp broadcast service, so that people can message my work phone, and I can add them to my contact list, and I can then broadcast out information about the different courses and the videos on YouTube and things directly to their phone without sharing their contact details with other people in the group. So that's been something that's been a really good learning point, and I think it will be quite successful, and I think we might try and roll it out so it's not just for the taster courses, but actually maybe a Newham-wide broadcast group, so that anybody who's interested in learning or free events can sign up and get information to their phone directly. I also finally found that creating a conversational environment is really important. So, you know, not just sitting there quietly as people come in, but having your colleagues there and being open and having a chat with them like you would, you know, if people were filtering into a normal room, you know, showing your human side rather than just your facilitator side, I think, which can sometimes be a bit about like, oh, make sure you mute yourself and this is how this works, really opening up. And that has created a real kind of sense of community and back and forth, and really breaking down those barriers between community and university in relation to the power structures. My final case study that I'm going to talk about is around evaluating content and online success. I think this can be a real challenge, especially when you're using things like YouTube to share your videos. One way that we found was really good is by making sure our videos are unlisted, sending them out in relation to a specific event with a specific mailing list, and then seeing what the interaction looks like with that, measuring that, and then making it public after that kind of initial focus push out, because that can really help us to see who's engaging, and it's more likely on our mailing list that those people are from our target groups. We have really kind of looked at our video statistics. We have kind of created a whole training for our team around monitoring and evaluating online, which involves encouraging people to look at the video views, how long people are watching the videos for, and also kind of encouraging people to use the functions online to do some more soft touch evaluation. We definitely found that sending out surveys works even less now that we're online, and have tried to use the polls function to do some more soft touch questions within sessions. So asking people, have you engaged with the pre-recorded material? What did you want to get out of these sessions? But actually doing that through the chat function and through polls on Blackboard Collaborate. We also always collect pre-session demographics, so information about things like household income and ethnicity, so that we can actually see who's coming along to our live events. The final case study that I wanted to share was around our student mystery shopper programme. So one of the things that we've done is ask our student ambassadors who come from an access background to come and mystery shop our events and review the experience from pre-event all the way to post-event, and all of our information that we send out and our communication. And that's worked really well. We kind of set up a feedback form and asked them to submit it after each event. The response was really positive, and I think there probably is something more to do around critical evaluation with those students, but it was a kind of a great experiment to see how our target group might actually experience those events. I hope I've got a few more minutes left. I'm going to talk about where next, and really, I suppose for me, that's about using familiar platforms, thinking about returning to face-to-face, but not for our large-scale events, more for our kind of one-to-one support around scholarships recipients, considering the local context when we think about moving back to face-to-face, which we will do alongside our online. For example, in Newham, we've had quite a lot of COVID deaths, and it's been a very difficult circumstance and a difficult few months for the community. So we would definitely think very carefully about that local geographical context before we decide what we're going to do next in relation to returning to community spaces. Similar to our first speaker, really thinking about a blended outreach model that kind of mixes online and face-to-face. And then finally, a focus on social connection all the way through all of our events, and using things like Facebook and WhatsApp, and encouraging students to connect and using icebreakers in our events, just to kind of really focus on that throughout everything that we do. That's me. Any questions, of course, do pop them in the chat, and we'll come to those after the session. If you want to contact me personally afterwards to ask any specific questions, here are the details, and I'll hand over to our chair now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hester. Another really interesting discussion. I love this idea about a student secret shopper. It's such a good idea and a really great way of getting critical feedback in a sort of meaningful way. So fascinating. And we have got questions for you at the end. So we'll hold on to those for you. So we'll move on swiftly to our final speaker for this work stream. I'm pleased to introduce Peter Collins, who joins us in his capacity as current head teacher of Slough and Eton CofE Business and Enterprise College, where he's been in post since September 2017. So during that year, Peter also assumed a role within the Slough and East Berkshire Academy Trust as Director of Secondary Learning, where he was pivotal in supporting a failing school in the local authority prior to their joining the Academy Trust itself. So Peter is going to be talking today on tackling barriers to progression. And Peter, over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. There's no slides for this presentation now. I'm just going to talk a bit about the school that I'm the head teacher of, the area that we're in, some of the things that are going on, and maybe pose a few questions about some things that I think it would be really helpful if there was perhaps more of that are maybe different to some of the things that have been going on already. So first of all, let me just tell you something about the school, because you'll all have heard the word Eton and you'll have got completely the wrong impression about where we are. So we're Slough and Eton because we're right by the M4, built on the mushroom fields of Eton College, and very much serving the Chalvey community in Slough, which is one of the most deprived wards in the Slough area. So very much trying to meet the needs of a disadvantaged community. And to give you an idea of some of the background, that transfers to about 30% of children being in receipt of free school meals, but about 65% of my cohort are learning in English as an additional language. And that's challenging at times, because in some year groups that's as high as 85%, but in others it's only 50%. And that obviously brings with it a level of academic disadvantage when you are preparing for study and higher education. As a school, we've got about a 2/3 boy-girl split, 2/3 towards the boys. There are 2 girls' schools in Slough, but no boys' schools. Slough is also a selective authority with 4 grammar schools in it, which means that the bulk of the children that come to this school have failed the 11+, and so that's how they begin their secondary school education. And parents are very influential in the lives of our children, especially the girls. We are about 2/3 of our children come from a Muslim background, and so the place of family and the influence of family and in some of their decisions is really quite significant. Notwithstanding all of those things, we strive very, very hard to be the very best school we can be for the children that come here. We have a really simple mantra, which is work hard, be nice, no excuses, and that applies to everybody in the organisation, whoever they are, whatever they do. We've got good ratings as far as Ofsted and church inspections are concerned, but they're quite some years ago now. Doesn't mean to say things are different, but they don't reflect the way the school is running now and the things we're doing now, certainly not in a post-COVID situation in school at the moment. But we also have invested heavily in accommodation, so the children have really good facilities, works really, really well, and every opportunity they can to be successful is on their side. We have got a few significant threats and challenges to us as a school, and therefore with children as they move through into further higher education. One of those is a new school coming around the corner, and another one is Brexit. Given that the population of Slough is only about 30% white British, we've got a significant number of people from Eastern Europe who are returning to Eastern Europe or not necessarily staying in Slough. So there's a lot of movement in a way that wasn't expected, and that's sort of things that we need to be factoring into our experiences. But we do lots of things to help encourage children not to leave school at 16 or 18, but to continue their education. And a lot of that, I would say, is very effective. If I take the year 13 that left in the summer of 2019, as we know where they all went to, there's still a lot sorting out with the current ones that just left. We had 104 students in that year group. We had 104, yes, and all bar 12 of them went to university. Those 12 then went off to some form of apprenticeship. And in the majority of cases, that was first choice universities, and there was some upgrading through clearing. But a lot of them were local universities where they could live at home and they could continue to support and be part of the family. And that's part of the thing I want to emphasise in a moment. But to get them there, There's lots of things we do so that they're not disadvantaged with children that have maybe had other experiences and other opportunities, either through the type of school they go to, or the area that they live in, or the means of their families to give them other opportunities. So, for example, over the last 10 years, we have subsidised trips and visits and activities to the tune of something like £750,000, so that it's as cheap as it can be for children. We aim for everybody to get on a residential experience if they can at some point in their time at school, but once a year to get out of school to something, whether that is going to a museum, whether it's going to a farm, whether it's going to London, anything along those lines. We provide lots of children, as you'd imagine, with textbooks and equipment. We are in an independent state schools partnership with several other local schools, including Eton College. That means that children here have access to things like a George Orwell Foundation writing project, like access to support with students at Eton when it comes to Oxbridge applications. We've got really close engagement with the business community in Slough. SEGRO is the part of the Slough Trading Estate, one of the biggest in the world, great for bringing companies in and working with young people. And of course, we do engage with taster days with universities as well, the kind of traditional experiences that children will get to go and see what life is like. And they tend to be very much pitched at children who are in receipt of free school meals. They're really rather traditional, and I'm not sure they tick the boxes for lots of children, but they certainly allow some access to higher education. And we have a writer in residence as well, who is a spoken word performer. We have we're part of something called the Brilliant Club, which maybe some people watching have been involved with as well, with university style lectures for students. So all that range of things culminates in us helping young people to be in the strongest position to write decent personal statements that get them to college or university if that's what they want. We pay the application fee for UCAS, so that that isn't a barrier to anybody. And obviously we then have bursaries and a lot of funding that we support them to get them there. En route, we have either a level 2 or a level 3 offer in the sixth form, and our level 2 offer then feeds into level 3 to help children then achieve what they need to go to university. And that level 2 offer includes a day's work experience a week, and we're one of the few schools in the area that has a level 2 offer as well. And the level 3 is mixed between A levels and vocational courses. So we do all that stuff, and actually it's going really well. Lots of students going to university. But there are definitely some barriers that I think universities could be more helpful with schools and colleges on, or do more of. And I can only speak from the experiences here at this school and in this area. But what I would say is I don't think we need to do any near as much work as we do on trying to encourage children to go to university, because they know whether they want to go to university or not. And a day trip somewhere to see what a university campus is like for lots of young people in our experience here doesn't make the difference between whether they want to do it or not. There are other things that I think influence their decisions about whether they want to go to university or not. Now, one of those is finances. And there are so many people will know better than me about this. There are so many misconceptions about the cost of going to university. And whilst we do a lot of work with students to understand how the finances work when they go to university and things like tuition fees and the grants that are available to them, a lot of parents haven't got a clue and are very misguided in their understanding of what debt their child is going to get into by going to university. So I think that in terms of schools and colleges working with universities about engagement in university courses, we need to do some work together with parents about how the finances are not risky for their children. And actually, in a lot of respects, it's a gamble if they see it that way, worth taking. But that said, the graduate apprenticeship route is becoming increasingly more popular as a way to earn and learn at the same time, particularly if you've got a family that want you to help support them in some way while studying at university. I mean support financially. So very much linked to that. If there was the capacity for those people in universities that reach out to students to encourage them to extend that one stage further, and the first presentation talked a little bit about engagement with parents, to work with families, I think that would be really, really important. I'll give you a couple of examples of what I mean, specific to our local context here. We have some families, particularly parents of girls, who will not let their children go and live away from home to study at university. There's no good reason for that. It's far less than it was, but families have their own reasons, whether they're religious or cultural. But when we're still serving a population with a lot of first generation students in this country, that barrier of not wanting their child to go far away, to mix with other people, or needing them to be part of how the family functions is something it's going to be difficult for children to overcome. And so that's where I think the finances can sometimes become a really helpful barrier for parents to reasons why their child might not be able to go to university. So we've done a great job of nailing quite a lot of this over the last few years, hence having those numbers I mentioned earlier on. But there's definitely a long way to go. And I think we're not in the know about that enough because it's not our area of expertise. But schools, I think, will be very keen to work with people on that sort of thing. The other big area I wanted to mention was about universities getting involved with academic tutoring of children. Students in the sixth form get their best chance of going to university by having the very best grades that they can. And actually, the relationships that they could build up with students at university studying subjects that could support them and coach them through their qualifications can make a massive difference. And we got some first-hand experience of that from the year before last, when we took part in an online tutoring program with year 11 students for English and maths with a university. And the tuition was free. It was online with undergraduates, tutoring students, rather like we're all engaging with each other now. But it was so popular with children, we had to run an applications process. They had to submit a letter of application to state why they were worthy, if you like, in terms of their approach to studies, of receiving £200 worth of free tuition, because there was no cost to them online, that they would be committed to engaging with it. And they loved it. They came after school, they sat to their computer, they started to engage online with the tutors. It's all safe because it's all in school, so some of those online protection issues we don't have to worry about in the same way. Certainly in terms of supporting their confidence, it really helped them with examination success in the most part, particularly for those that engaged all the way through, but it also opened up their eyes to working with young people at university on a regular basis, as opposed to fairly briefly. So I think if there is the opportunity for universities to see that the role with outreach is maybe not about enrichment anymore, that enrichment has a place, but I don't think it makes a massive difference, but actually that work with young people at school and college to get the best grades they can, that work with their families to help them to better understand that it's not a risky experience in the way they perceive it to be going to university, and that the finances are worth it, I think in the longer term can make a huge difference to continuing to improve uptake and participation. And I see no reason why that needs to be limited to examination students in year 11 or year 13. There's no reason why undergraduates can't start working with children when they come to secondary school in year 7, year 8 and year 9. If you're in year 10, let's say, year 9, year 10, and you've been on free school meals all the time you've been at school, then you come from some of the poorest families in this country. That is what that means to be on free school meals. It means your family is very, very poor and at risk of not having enough money to feed everybody well, through no fault necessarily of your own and your circumstances. So to work with those children to help them see that university is as much a place that they could go to as anybody else is a really, really powerful message. And I actually think the shift there's been online over the last 6 months because of the COVID-19 pandemic makes this really, really easy to do. Everybody's up for it. All the children at this school that don't have a laptop at home have one now, thanks to us. It could happen next week if there were people there able to do it and wanting to do it. So I think the time is right for an opportunity, and that makes it really cheap as well, because we haven't got to worry about transportation, organising events, moving people here, there, and actually the focus being much more on the logistics of moving children into a place to experience something for a few hours. It can be all about their learning experience. So I'm going to conclude, because I know that we're tighter on time now and we want some time for the Q&A, but kind of in a summary, I think it's important where we can, we move on from the old partnership and enrichment model that there was, and shift that thinking towards working schools and universities as partners to achieve academic success for children, with families at the heart of that, not just the young person. If we can do that, I reckon we can make a massive difference to some children who maybe would not go to university because they just don't think it's for them. And on that note, I'll be quiet and hand back to the chair. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Peter. Really interesting to hear from your perspective as a head teacher how schools, universities can work together and really put family at the heart of that. Absolutely fascinating. And again, more questions have been coming in. So I'm going to invite our speakers back onto the screens, and I will go to my list of questions which Amber has been sending through. Thank you to everyone who has sent a question in. So Claire, if I could start with you, we've had quite a few questions about the podcasts. So I don't suppose you could tell us a little bit about how many students engaged with the podcasts and how they found that, if you had any feedback about how useful those were. And also if there's anything you can say about how you advertised them, the kind of content that you covered and the length of the podcasts, that would be really helpful. So a few things there. If I can hand over to you.
Yeah, that's super. I'd love to be able to say yes to all of them. So the podcast is something that we've developed over the last couple of months, so it's brand new. So interaction or engagement with it is totally unknown at the moment. So our students have only just started back as a curriculum year. And as part of that, nobody is online because of issues that we've got as a college. So it's not been the easiest start to run our online initiatives. So to answer that unfortunately answers that. It has been engaged and interacted with by curriculum, which is really positive because ultimately, you know, they are one of our voices to reaching our young people, our students. The content has been mapped out for the foreseeable future. They are about 15 minutes long. We work in partnership with our universities and students. So the first episode included a student talking about their experience about applying to university, and they range in topics, and the aim of it is to be informative. So they are short, snappy. They all have an interview with an external guest, and then they're followed by a top tips from myself and Charlotte, who host it. And yeah, so at the moment we've just done the latest one was on conservatoires, with obviously the change in deadlines. The next one's on medicine, and then we're going on to do one about studying higher education at a college. So lots of different topics. The aim for promotion to students, I suppose, you know, we have a plan for that. We're working in line with our marketing department, and as I mentioned about the layers in our approach this year, that is just one of our layers. So when we have interactions with students at events, through classrooms, through Hangouts is a really big way of communicating with our students. So we staff and have Hangout groups where students come in and ask their questions, and we, you know, signpost into our classroom. All of this kind of is self, you know, marketing and self, you know, helps each other. But the main ways of marketing it is, through our marketing team, who would have that reach with parents. I think someone mentioned to me, you know, how do we reach that? And the other main way is through our tutors and through the activities and events that we do through them or with them. So there are two main ways, and obviously working as part of the Go Higher West Yorkshire, we're in partnership with all of the universities in the local area, schools in the local area, and other colleges in the local area. So we hope this will be a tool or a resource for all of them. You know, it's not about our students. You know, it's a resource for all. Sorry, did I mumble then? Is that okay? Any more?
No, I think that's covered everything. It's really helpful, I think, to have these sort of practical insights around logistics and things. And yeah, just really glorious to have experience of facilitating a podcast. I'm sure it's very exciting. Oh, thank you so much, Claire. So we'll move on to the next question. I've got one here for Hester, if I could aim this one at you. So we had a question come in that said, online community sounds like a great idea, and I think we can all agree that's, you know, a wonderful thing to be able to facilitate. But there were some concerns about safeguarding for young people, especially people under the age of 18, between 16 and 18. So do you have any ideas how you might implement safeguarding for this age group within that online community?
Yeah, so obviously we're in a way quite lucky because we do have to worry about safeguarding, but not in the same way as when working with people under 18. So I have a couple of ideas, and of course these will be like dependent on the way your institution works and your data protection officer and your kind of safeguarding policy. But we do use Moodle as an open outreach hub, both for our kind of taster programs, but also for a program called On Track, which is specifically for BTEC students who have an offer to study at Birkbeck. When they applied and were offered the space, they were given a student number, even though they weren't yet enrolled. And that means that we worked with the systems administrators to get them a login to Moodle, which meant that they can now use Moodle to its full functionality, so set up forums and things like that. We've also had some discussions about potentially using that for our other outreach work. So with our taster programs, actually almost putting them formally on the website as a hidden short course, which would then give people a student number, even though it would just be for kind of like the 4 to 6 weeks that they were involved with that program. And we could then give them a login to log into things like Moodle and use forums and all that kind of stuff. So that might be like one option for you to look at if you're running kind of programs, and you can work with your systems administrators to put that on the website and get people a student number, even though they're not technically a like paying student. And then the other option is, and this will depend on kind of your kind of GDPR and data protection officer, whether they're happy for you to use this in this way. We do use Facebook again for our over 18s, but we have a closed group where we can only admit the people that we want to admit. So we would check that against lists, and you can pre-moderate comments. So that might be a way of getting around things if you're working with under 18s, potentially, in that you could very much check who's coming into that group. You could use it as a space to kind of post things, because actually we don't get much community interaction in that Facebook group itself, but it would then give people the opportunity to add each other outside the kind of the Facebook group. And if you moderated, so for example, you're ensuring that no one over 18s come into that group, and you know it's only from a specific school group or like group of schools, then that might potentially be an option. But I'm not a safeguarding expert in relation to these things, so those are my suggestions, and I'll leave it to you to think about what might work for you.
Thank you, Hester. Really great suggestions as well, and again very practical, which I'm sure everyone appreciates. So I've got a question here for Peter. Somebody has asked how you're planning to continue the experiences that you facilitate and fund, so trips and employer engagement during within this new COVID world that we find ourselves in.
Oh, if I knew the answer to that. All I can tell you is what we're doing at the moment, as opposed to what we're going to continue to do, because schools are in a really tricky place at the moment, like everybody, because we're all just sort of having to work it out based on what the most recent piece of government guidance was. So actually, not for this term that we're in now up until Christmas, we're not running any trips at all. We're not taking any children out of the school anywhere. And that's, apart from the fact that it's very difficult to do that, although it's not impossible. Actually, right now, children need to be back in classrooms with their teachers, working and learning, and teachers don't need to be not there with some classes taking children away. So that's been our focus for this term. But what we are starting to do is actually look at the extent to which we can run some of these events online. So we're doing some work with Year 13 this week on CVs and applications, and we're doing that with a business partnership group, but it's via an online platform where they kind of zoom in, not Zoom actually, they're not using Zoom, but they come in during their tutorial time, and there's some interactive discussion there. When we do the, we have a group called Senioras, which is a student enrichment group that has visiting speakers coming to school. So we've had the Slough MP, who is a guy called Tan Desi, who is the first Sikh MP in the House of Parliament, very vocal, very popular in the local community. We've had someone like him in, we've had boxers in, we've had journalists in, and those sorts of people are keen to come back and do it in a sort of video conferencing style. So we're at the moment looking at there's some software we use in schools that's not for video conferencing that could be used for that. And I think in the short term, video conferencing is going to be our way to expose children to a range of things. But as we all get more clear what we can and can't do with COVID rules, our students will be going off to what they can when they can. The universities have cancelled, understandably, everything that we did have planned for this term. But I know from the messages coming from them, their plan is to see what can be done remotely as well.
Wonderful, great, that's really helpful. Thank you, Peter. And yeah, video conferencing is so helpful, and obviously we're thinking today about digital access and barriers to that too, which feeds into this discussion. And thinking about access, there is a question, it will take us just a few minutes into the lunch break, but I'll try and remain boundaried with it and not keep you too much longer. Questions that came up for all of you, and I will open this to all of you, was around engaging parents and people who maybe don't use social media. So is there anything that any of you would like to say about engaging people outside of social media who won't necessarily engage with information evenings, for example, and overcoming that challenge? It's quite a big question. I'm sure it's not an easy answer either. Yeah, Hester, thank you.
So we do have a family learning aspect to our work, and that's very much around not only providing parents with advice about higher education, but actually saying to them higher education can also be an option for you as a mature student. But one of the things that we've been trialling this year is family learning activities. So working with our academics to do half-term or summer holiday activities which bring children and families together to learn together. That brings the parents into a room because they're kind of looking for activities to support their child and kind of take a bit of pressure off them over the holidays. But it then gives us an opportunity to talk to them within that setting about higher education without it being like a specifically higher education focused event, which has worked really well.
Fab, thank you, Hester. And yes, Peter, if you'd like to share.
Yeah. Yes, three things that I can share. We have what's called a community outreach team here in school, and we employ some members of the local community who speak the languages that our children speak at home, and perhaps parents speak more fluently than English. So we work through them a lot with some parents. That's easier for us to do than a bigger institution like a university. But the other thing that we found very effective in the scenarios where parents don't really engage with social media and don't really have much of an online platform is they do still have a mobile phone, and actually bulk text messaging out to parents is a kind of forgotten thing, but actually they all have the phone, they get the text message, they might not do anything else on the phone, but the fact that there's then a translation facility that tends to happen, so text messaging and then picking up the phone and ringing, much more time consuming, but we find where the other bits aren't working, one of those three routes in most cases ticks the box that we need to tick to get that kind of engagement going, but they are more time consuming.
Sure, thank you, Peter. Yeah, obviously it's good to have that option, even if it is a little bit more time consuming. That's really helpful. Yeah, and Claire, if you'd like to share.
Yeah, I think from a college point of view, again, the age group, they're in that in-between stage of being independent and being, having monitoring by the parents. So parent engagement is really hard because we have to be sensitive that actually for age limits that we can't speak to their parents and it is them that we need to talk to. So parents engagement for college as a whole, whether that's for an outreach service like us or just in general, is a challenge. And I'd say that the main connection with our parents and with our students is teachers, is tutors. And, we don't underestimate how much of an influence that they are, and that their attitudes, their ideas, their concepts of what their course subject leads them and propels them into university, and the misconceptions and stereotypes around that is a really big part of our work, which is a subtle part of work. We don't run in and tell tutors that they're wrong, but it's that connection, it's the working relationship with tutors that we work really hard at, kind of behind the scenes, because they are ultimately our voice when we're not there, and they are ultimately a guide when we're not there. So I would definitely recommend that it's the people that see and know the students, it is kind of our approach to it. And without that, we would be lost.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Claire. And thank you everyone for sticking around 5 minutes into the lunch break. I think it was important to ask that question because it came up for all of you. So I think we'll leave it there. I'm sure you'll all want to join me in thanking Claire, Hester and Peter for their contributions this morning and for answering all of the questions with really thought-provoking and practical approaches and insights. and plenty for us to digest during our lunch breaks. We'll be regrouping at 1:45 when post-lunch presentations are going to kick off with a short talk from Richard Dorney-Savage, who is the area manager at the Careers and Enterprise Company in the West, and that's on the subject of overcoming the challenges of access to students. So thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of the day and enjoy your lunch break.
Do we hang up now? Do you do now? Yeah, okay, bye. Nice to hear from you both. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.